Erosion of civil rights protections. An in-depth analysis. The erosion of civil rights protections has profound implications for marginalized communities, particularly Black Americans, who have fought for decades to secure equal rights and opportunities. Civil rights laws serve as the foundation for ensuring equity in education, employment, housing, voting, and the justice system. When these protections are weakened, it not only reverses hard-won progress, but also perpetuates systemic inequalities. This article explores how the erosion of civil rights manifests in various aspects of society, its consequences for the Black community, and the need for sustained advocacy to safeguard these rights. Historical context. Civil rights protections were established to address systemic racism and discrimination rooted in America's history of slavery, segregation, and inequality. Landmark legislations like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968 marked significant milestones in the fight for justice and equality. However, these protections have faced continuous challenges. From voter suppression laws to rollbacks of affirmative action policies, efforts to undermine civil rights have persisted, often targeting the very communities they were designed to protect. Manifestations of erosion in modern America. 1. Workplace discrimination. Civil rights laws, such as Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, prohibit workplace discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Yet, the rollback of enforcement mechanisms threatens these safeguards. Weakening of anti-discrimination enforcement. Agencies like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, have seen reduced budgets, limiting their ability to investigate claims of workplace bias. Prevalence of systemic racism. Black workers continue to face wage gaps, underrepresentation in leadership roles, and discrimination in hiring practices. 2. Housing discrimination. The Fair Housing Act was designed to prevent racial segregation in housing. However, recent policies have undermined these protections. Revocation of fair housing rules. The rollback of policies requiring communities to address racial disparities in housing perpetuates segregation. Discriminatory lending practices. Black families often face higher mortgage interest rates and reduced access to affordable loans, widening the racial wealth gap. 3. Educational inequities. Education is a critical pathway to opportunity, yet disparities persist due to systemic racism and policy rollbacks. Affirmative action under threat. Recent court rulings have limited the ability of institutions to consider race in admissions, potentially reducing diversity in higher education. Discriminatory school policies. Inequitable funding and harsher disciplinary actions against Black students contribute to the achievement gap and the school-to-prison pipeline. 4. Voting rights suppression. Voting rights are fundamental to democracy, yet they remain a battleground for civil rights. Rollback of the Voting Rights Act. The 2013 Shelby County v. Holder decision weakened key provisions, allowing states to implement restrictive voting laws, voter ID laws, and gerrymandering. Policies that disproportionately affect Black voters undermine political representation and participation. 5. Criminal justice and police accountability. The justice system often reflects and reinforces systemic biases, particularly against Black Americans. Lack of police reform. Rollbacks on consent decrees and accountability measures for law enforcement exacerbate racial profiling and brutality. Disproportionate sentencing. Policies that perpetuate harsher sentencing for Black individuals further entrench racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Consequences for the Black community. Economic impact. Erosion of workplace protections and housing discrimination exacerbates economic disparities. Black families face greater financial insecurity due to wage gaps, higher unemployment rates, and limited access to generational wealth through home ownership. Educational disadvantages. Reduced access to quality education hinders upward mobility and perpetuates cycles of poverty. Black students are disproportionately affected by underfunded schools, exclusionary discipline practices, and limited representation in higher education. Mental and emotional strain. Systemic inequities and the constant fight for civil rights create significant mental health challenges. Experiences of discrimination and institutional bias contribute to higher rates of stress, anxiety, and depression among Black individuals. Political marginalization. Voter suppression and gerrymandering dilute the political power of Black communities, limiting their ability to advocate for policies that address systemic inequities. The broader threat to democracy. The erosion of civil rights protections is not only a threat to marginalized communities, but also to the principles of democracy itself. A society that tolerates inequality and discrimination undermines its commitment to justice, fairness, and inclusion. When civil rights are weakened, trust in institutions erodes, social divisions deepen, and progress becomes increasingly difficult. This regression jeopardizes the nation's ability to address critical challenges, from economic inequality to climate justice, in an equitable manner. Advocacy and resistance. Legal challenges. Organizations like the NAACP, ACLU, and the Legal Defense Fund play a crucial role in challenging discriminatory policies in court. Legal action remains a powerful tool to uphold civil rights protections and hold institutions accountable. Community mobilization. Grassroots movements have historically been at the forefront of civil rights advocacy. Community organizing, protests, and voter mobilization efforts are essential for driving change and amplifying marginalized voices. Policy reforms. Advocates must push for policies that strengthen civil rights protections, such as restoring the Voting Rights Act, increasing funding for education, and implementing police accountability measures. Education and awareness. Raising awareness about the importance of civil rights protections is key to building public support. Platforms like social media, podcasts, and community forums can be used to educate and engage diverse audience. Conclusion. The erosion of civil rights protections threatens to undo decades of progress toward equality and justice. For the Black community, these rollbacks exacerbate systemic inequities and hinder efforts to build a more equitable society. Addressing these challenges requires sustained advocacy, community mobilization, and a collective commitment to upholding the principles of civil rights. By confronting these threats head-on, we can ensure that the hard-won gains of the past are not lost, and that future generations can thrive in a society that truly values equality and inclusion.